If we go back out there, we die too. She's a Grayson. Her father's people can come find her. Ethan Walker stared at the chaperone who just said that out loud, and then he reached for the rope. Stop right there, because what this man just decided is going to cost a 19-year-old girl her life unless one poor farm boy that everybody in that town looked down on does the one thing no adult in that room had the courage to do. If this story moves you even a little, take 1 second and subscribe, follow all the way to the end, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Now into the storm. The chaperone said it a second time slower, like maybe Ethan hadn't heard him right the first time. She's not our responsibility, son. Not in this weather. Ethan Walker heard him fine. That was the problem. There were 11 of them crammed into that little ranger warming hut, students and 2 adults, and every single one of them had gone quiet the way people go quiet when somebody says a thing they all secretly agreed with, but nobody wanted to be the one to say. Ethan looked around at those faces, kids he had gone to school with his whole life, kids who'd called his boots manure kickers that very morning, and he watched them stare at their own frozen fingers so they wouldn't have to look at him. Say her name, Ethan said. The chaperone blinked. What? You keep saying she. Say her name. Walker, sit down, and Lily. Ethan's voice cracked on it, and he hated that it did because he needed it to sound like iron, and instead it came out like a boy's. Her name is Lily Grayson, and she is somewhere out in that, and you're standing in a heated room deciding she can die because you're scared of her daddy's motorcycle jacket. Somebody in the back sucked in a breath. The chaperone, a heavy-set man named Dale Pruitt, who taught woodshop and coached JV, and had never in his life been talked to like this by a 20-year-old in a coat with a torn elbow, went red from the collar up. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong, Ethan said. Tell me you did a head count before you closed that door. Silence. That was the first thing that broke Ethan clean open, that silence, because it told him everything. Nobody had counted. In the panic of the crash and the scramble uphill through the whiteout, in the relief of getting a door shut behind them, nobody had stopped to count 11 heads and realized there should have been 12. They'd left her, and they hadn't even had the decency to mean to. She'd fallen out of their attention the same way she fell out of every conversation, every lunch table, every group photo. Lily Grayson had spent her whole life being invisible, and now being invisible was going to freeze her to death, and the grown men in charge were relieved. How long, Ethan said. Son. How long has she been out there? The other chaperone, a young substitute named Ms. Reyes, who couldn't have been more than 3 years older than the seniors, finally spoke, and her voice was shaking. The bus went off the road maybe 40 minutes ago. We hiked up. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth. Oh, God. Oh, my God, we left her on the bus. She was in the back. She was always in the back. She was always in the back. Ethan felt those words go into him like a nail. He knew exactly what she meant. He'd been sitting 3 rows up. He'd seen Lily get on that bus at 6 a.m. with her hood up and her chin down, seen her take the very last seat, the one nobody fought over, the one you only sat in if you had nobody to sit with. He'd almost said something to her. He'd almost turned around and said, hey, just one dumb word, and he hadn't, because he was tired and cold and worried about his own family, and he figured a girl like that wouldn't want to talk to a boy like him. And now he was the only one in the room standing up. Pruitt. Ethan's hands were already moving. There was a coil of climbing rope hung on a nail by the door orange, the kind rangers keep for exactly this. He took it down. Where's the closest radio? There's no radio, the line's down. That's why we can't. Dale Pruitt cut himself off and shifted his weight between Ethan and the door, and that shift, that little body block, told Ethan the man wasn't scared of the storm. He was scared of what happened after. He was scared of being the adult who let a girl die and having to explain it. He'd rather she never be found at all. You go out in that, you don't come back. Then I've got 2 of you. I am not signing off on. You're not signing off on anything, Ethan said. I'm 20. I'm not one of your students. I'm the hired help, remember? You told me that this morning. That landed. Ethan watched it land, because that was what Pruitt had told him this morning. Ethan Walker wasn't on this trip as a student. He'd graduated 2 years back. He was here because the school paid a small stipend for a young able body to help load gear and shovel steps and haul coolers, and the Walker family needed $40 the way a drowning man needs a plank. Dale Pruitt had handed him a shovel at dawn and said, keep up and keep quiet, and we'll get you paid. The hired help. The poor kid. The one whose daddy got hurt and whose farm was going under, and who'd take any humiliation you dished out as long as there was money at the end of it. Well, the hired help was the only one reaching for the rope. You give me one flashlight in 40 minutes, Ethan said, wrapping the rope over his shoulder and across his chest the way his grandfather had taught him, and I don't care what you sign. A boy named Cody Bishop, the same Cody who'd flicked a wad of paper at the back of Ethan's neck 2 hours ago, spoke up from the corner, and his voice didn't have any meanness in it now. It had the small, scared honesty that comes out of teenagers when the world stops being a joke. Ethan, man, it's white out there. You can't see your hand. You'll get 20 feet and you'll be gone too. Then I'll tie off, Ethan said and held up the rope. That's what this is for. Tie off to what? Ethan looked at the doorframe. Solid pine bolted into a stone footing. He looped the rope's end around it twice and cinched it down with a knot his grandfather had made him tie 100 times in the dark of the barn, blindfolded until his hands knew it without his eyes. A knot you can't tie in the dark is a knot you don't know, the old man used to say. And the dark is exactly when you'll need it. His grandfather had been dead 4 years. Ethan's hands remembered him anyway. I follow the rope out, Ethan said mostly to himself, now mapping it. Downhill back toward the road toward the bus. If she moved downhill. Cold makes you go down, always down. That's what he told me. I find her. I follow the rope back. The rope is the way home. As long as I've got the rope, I've got the way home. Miss Reyes stepped forward. Her face was wet. I'll come with you. No, I can't just. You've got 10 kids in this room and one flashlight left after I take mine. Ethan said gentler now, because she was the only other person who'd said Lily's situation out loud. Somebody's got to keep them warm and keep them here and keep them counting. You count okay every 10 minutes, you count heads. You don't lose anybody else. That's your job. That's more important than mine. She stared at him. Then she nodded and something passed between them, a kind of respect that Ethan Walker had gone 20 years without receiving from a single adult in that town, and it had to show up now in a shack in a blizzard from a substitute teacher who'd known him for 6 hours. He turned to the door. Walker. Prewitt's voice again, but different this time. Not blocking. Something cracked in it. The man swallowed. If you find her, he couldn't finish it. Then it'll be because I looked, Ethan said, and not because you told me to. And he opened the door and the storm reached in and grabbed him. Shwayam, here is a thing about the cold that people who've never truly been in it do not understand. It does not feel like cold at first. It feels like anger. Ethan stepped out and the wind hit him broadside and it didn't chill him. It shoved him hard like a bigger kid on a playground, like it had a grudge. His breath was ripped out of his mouth before he could use it. His eyes watered instantly, and the tears froze on his lower lashes, and he had to blink like a man coming up out of water. He got both hands on the rope. The rope is the way home. As long as I've got the rope, I've got the way home. He started down. It's a strange, terrible thing to walk into nothing. There was no down and no up, no ground and no sky, just a roaring gray-white that pressed on every side, and the only real thing in the entire universe was the coil of orange rope paying out through his gloved fists. He walked with his shoulder into the wind and his head down and his boots feeling for the slope, and every few steps he'd stop and yell, Lily! The wind ate it, took the word out of his mouth and threw it back over his shoulder and buried it. Lily Grayson. Nothing but the roar. 20 steps. 30. The rope was going tight behind him. Good, that meant he was moving in a straight line downhill toward the road. 40 steps. His face had stopped hurting, and Ethan knew enough to be scared by that, because a face that stops hurting is a face that's starting to freeze. And after the face, it's the hands, and after the hands, it's your thinking. And once your thinking goes, you sit down in the snow and you feel warm, and you never get up. His grandfather had told him that. His grandfather had also told him something else. The thing Ethan had never told a living soul. The thing that was walking through the storm right beside him now, whether he wanted it there or not. Because this exact thing was how his father had gotten hurt. 4 winters ago, a different storm, a different mountain, a neighbor's boy lost in the same kind of white. And Tom Walker, Ethan's father, 38 years old and strong as a fence post, had gone out into it because that's what you did. That's what a man did. You didn't leave a child in the cold. He'd found the boy. He'd brought the boy back alive. And on the way down in the dark, a slope that wasn't there in the daylight gave way under Tom Walker's feet. And he fell 20 feet onto rock and shattered his hip and his leg in 4 places. And he had lain there in the snow with a broken body and a saved child until the search party found them both at dawn. The boy lived. Tom Walker never walked right again. And that was the beginning of the end of the Walker farm. The surgeries, the bills, the months a strong man spent flat on his back watching his fields go to seed the loans. The second loans, the letter from the bank that was sitting on the kitchen table right now, with a foreclosure date printed on it in a font that didn't care. Everybody in town knew that story. And here is the ugly secret shape of how a town's mind works. They pitied the Walkers for it, and pity given long enough curdles into contempt. Poor Tom broke himself for somebody else's kid. Poor family. Should have known better. Charity cases. The Walker boy, you know the one, the quiet one, the poor one. Did you hear his daddy's about to lose the whole place? Ethan had grown up inside that story. He'd grown up being the son of the man who ruined his family being a hero. And somewhere down deep in a place he never let the daylight touch, Ethan had made himself a promise: I will never be that stupid. I will never throw my own life away for someone else's and leave nothing behind but a debt. He'd promised himself that. And now here he was in the exact same storm, on the exact same kind of mountain, doing the exact same thing for a girl he had never once spoken to. Lily, he screamed, and this time it came out wrong, came out broken because he was arguing with a dead man in his own head. I'm not you. I'm not doing what you did. I'm smarter than you were. He gripped the rope so hard his hand cramped. I've got the rope. You didn't have the rope. I learned from you. He kept going down. And that was when his boot found something that wasn't snow. It was the bus. Ethan nearly walked into the side of it before he saw it. The huge dark wall of it looming out of the white tilted at a sick angle where it had slid off the road and hung up on the tree line. The windows were dark, the doorbell hung open, drifting snow already piling up the steps. His heart went up into his throat. Lily. He hauled himself up the steps. The inside of the bus was a wreck. Bags thrown everywhere, shattered window seats knocked crooked and empty. He went down the aisle screaming her name, checking under every seat, throwing bags aside. And the whole time a voice in his head was chanting, she's here, she has to be here. She went back to the bus, she'd go somewhere she knew, and she wasn't there. The last seat, her seat was empty. There was a scarf on the floor, pale blue. He picked it up. And then he saw the back emergency door. It was open. Not knocked open, opened. Somebody had pushed the release from the inside and gone out the back down into the trees away from the road. Ethan's stomach dropped because that was the worst possible thing. She hadn't stayed put. She hadn't waited in the one place a rescuer would think to look. She'd gone off into the woods downhill away, and Ethan knew exactly why, and the knowing of it made him sick. She'd gone looking for them. She'd woken up alone on a wrecked bus in a blizzard, and she'd realized every other human being she'd been with had left without her, and she had not sat down to wait for help. Because Lily Grayson, at 19 years old, did not believe help was coming for her. She had never in her life had one single reason to believe that help was coming for her. So she'd gotten up and she'd gone out into a storm to try and save herself, because she was the only person she'd ever been able to count on. Ethan stood in the back door of that bus with a blue scarf in his fist, and he understood her completely. All at once, this girl he'd never spoken to, and something in his chest broke wide open and turned into fuel. Okay, don't, he said out loud to nobody to her. Okay, I'm coming, you hear me? He looked back at the rope. He'd reached the end of it. 40, 50 feet all paid out, the last of it looped over his shoulder. The rope reached the bus and no further. Beyond the back door, there was only the woods and the white and no rope at all. The rope is the way home. As long as I've got the rope, I've got the way home. If he let go of the rope, he had no way home. Ethan stood there for what felt like a year and was probably 4 seconds. He thought about his father on his back in the front room. He thought about his mother's face. He thought about the letter on the kitchen table. He thought about the promise he'd made himself, I will never be that stupid. And he thought about a girl going out into the dark alone because she'd learned that nobody comes for her. Then he tied the end of the rope to the handle of the emergency door hard, that same blind knot his hands knew in the dark, so that whoever came for the bus would find a rope leading off into the trees and know which way to follow. He wrapped Lily's blue scarf around his own wrist, and he stepped down off the back of that bus off the end of the rope into the woods with no way home at all. He was doing the exact thing that had destroyed his family, and he had never once in his life been more sure of anything. The woods were worse. In the open, the wind at least came from one direction. In the trees, it came from everywhere, funneled and swirling, throwing snow off branches in white avalanches, and the ground was a mess of buried roots and hidden holes that grabbed his ankles. He fell twice in the first 100 feet. The second time, he went down hard on his knee, and the pain was clean and bright, and he almost laughed because pain meant he could still feel, and feeling was good. Feeling meant he was still alive enough to be scared. Lily. He had worked out a system. He'd yell, then count to 5, then listen. Yell, count, listen. He forced himself to do it even though every part of his body screamed to just keep moving, generate heat, don't stop. Because if she answered and he was mid-stride, mid-yell, he'd never hear her. And the whole thing came down to whether he could hear her. Lily Grayson, it's Ethan. I'm looking for you. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing. The roar. He picked a downhill line and followed it because cold makes you go down, always down. He tried to think like her. She's cold. She's scared. She's been walking a while. She's exhausted. Her thinking's already going. Where does a person like that end up? Not on the open slope. The wind would drive her off it. In the trees, then. Somewhere the wind is a little less. Somewhere she could sit. His grandfather's voice. When they stop moving, they look for a wall. A rock, a fallen tree, a bank. Something at their back. Find the walls. Ethan started looking for walls. Lily, count. 1, 2. He heard it. He wasn't even sure he heard it. It was so small, so swallowed that it might have been the wind doing an imitation of a human sound the way wind does. But it came from his left and down, and it wasn't a word. It was just a sound, a thin, high sound, and every hair on Ethan's body stood up. Lily! He wheeled toward it. Lily, make noise, make any noise, hit something, I'm here. He plunged toward where it had come from, and he was running now, or doing the closest thing to running you can do in 3 feet of snow, falling and getting up and falling, and he was yelling her name over and over, Mom. So she'd have something to move toward, too, so they'd find each other in the middle, and there she was. She was down against the base of a big deadfall, a whole toppled tree, the root ball rearing up at her back like a wall. She'd found her wall some animal part of her had known to find the wall, and she was curled so small, so tight, knees to her chest, and her lips were gray, and her eyes were half open and glassy, and she was so far gone she couldn't lift her head. The sound she'd made was her boot heel kicking weakly against a root. She'd heard him. She'd been trying to kick. Oh no, 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 no. Ethan hit his knees in front of her and got his hands on her face, and it was so cold. Her skin was so cold, colder than skin should ever be, and still be a person. Lily, Lily, hey, look at me. Look at me. I got you. You hear me. I got you. Her eyes rolled toward him. There was almost nobody home behind them, but her cracked gray lips moved, and what came out in a whisper he had to put his ear against her mouth to catch was the single most heartbreaking sentence Ethan Walker had ever heard in his life. You came back, she whispered, for me. Somebody came back. And then her eyes closed. No. Ethan grabbed her shoulders and shook her once hard. No, you don't. You don't get to close your eyes. Lily, Lily, open your eyes. Right now, you open them. You look at me. Her eyes cracked open again. Just barely. There you go. There you go. Stay with me. You stay looking at me. Okay, you don't look anywhere else. Just me. He was already pulling his coat off his own coat, the only real coat he had, and wrapping it around her, tucking it, cinching it, moving fast. His grandfather's voice roaring in his ears. Now get them off the ground. The ground steals more heat than the air. Get them off the ground. Put something between them and the ground. Wrap the core first, always the core. The arms and legs can wait. Wrap the chest and the belly. You said somebody came back. That's right. Somebody came back. And guess what? More people are coming. A lot more. You just got to hold on till they get here. Can you do that? Can you hold on? Her lips moved. No sound. I need words, Lily. I can't let you sleep, and I can't let you go quiet, so you got to give me words. Anything. Tell me anything. Tell me. His mind grabbed for something, anything, a thread to keep her talking, keep her here. Tell me your dad. Tell me about your dad, Grizzly Wright Mason. Tell me one thing about him that nobody in that town knows. One thing they got wrong. And that reached something in her that the cold hadn't gotten to yet. Her eyes focused. Just a hair. Just enough. Everybody's scared of him, she breathed. Yeah, keep going. Why are they wrong? A long, terrible pause. Ethan was hauling branches over now one-handed, never letting go of her, building the wall higher. breaking off pine boughs and jamming them into the gaps of the deadfall to make a roof moving faster than he'd ever moved in his life.